Hello everyone, welcome to 7.8, compare mixed number, factors, and products. The essential question is, how does the size of the product compare to the size of one factor when multiplying fractions greater than 1? So you can create an area model, or you can just do the way that I showed you yesterday. I call it the roller coaster method, but what you're essentially doing is you're converting it from a mixed number, so if I have 1 and 2 over 3, you're converting it back into an improper fraction, so you can multiply your numerators and your denominators. So the way that you do it is you take your denominator here and you're going to multiply it with the whole number, because you want to see how many of these fractions is there a whole of. So you take 3 times 1, and then what you're going to do is you're going to add whatever's left over, which is represented in your numerator. So 3 times 1 is 1, plus 2 is 5, so improper fraction would be 5 over 3. So that's one way to do it, so you can easily multiply the mixed numbers. Let's just go ahead and get to the examples. You don't have to write down the steps this time because it's the same steps as before. But let's go ahead and let's go over the examples. One rule of thumb that you need to know is that when you're multiplying fractions, if you're multiplying a fraction by 1, then the fraction is going to be equal to what you multiply by. So like if I'm doing 1 and 1/2 and I'm multiplying that by 1, well, any number times 1 is going to be that same number, so it's going to be equal to 1 and 1/2. Now if I'm multiplying 1 and 1/2 to a fraction that's not improper, so like if I'm multiplying 1 and 1/2 times 1/2, then whatever your answer is going to be less than the initial fraction that you're multiplying it by. So it's going to be less than 1 and 1/2. And if you're multiplying two whole numbers together, or two mixed numbers together, like 1 and 1/2 times 1 and 1/4, then your answer is going to be greater than the initial fraction that you're multiplying it by. Okay, so that's a good rule of thumb to know, because in these questions they're going to ask you, is it greater than, less than, or equal to? So let's go ahead and get started with the first example. We got 1 and 1/2 times 1 and 1/4. Okay, so that's the first example. Here's a second example if you want to write that one down. 1 and 2/5 times 2 and 1/2. Okay, let's go ahead and go back up to the first one. So what we want to do is we want to convert these into mixed numbers into improper fraction. So I'm going to take 1 and 1/2. I'm going to take 2, multiply it by 1, and then add the numerator. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. So I got 3 over 2. 1 and 1/4. If I'm going to multiply 4 times 1 is 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. So it's going to be 5 over 4. So now I have my improper fractions. All I got to do now is multiply numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. So 3 times 5 is 15. 2 times 4 is 8. So I have 15 over 8. And to make this back into a mixed number, you got to do some long division. How many times does 8 go into 15? Well, I know it goes in there 1 time, so it's going to be 1 whole. 15 minus 8 is 7, and your denominator stays the same. So my answer is 1 and 7 over 8. Okay, let's go ahead and do the second example. We got 2 more, and I know that 1 and 7 over 8 is greater than 1 and 1/2. All right, so let's do the last example. We have 1 and 2 over 5 times 2 and 1/2. So I'm going to convert these into mixed numbers. I'm going to multiply the denominator times the whole number and add the numerator. Okay, 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7, so I got 7 over 5. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, that's 5 over 2. So I have 7 over 5 times 5 over 2. 7 times 5 is 35, numerator times numerator. 5 times 2 is 10, denominator times denominator. So I need to figure out how many times does 10 go into 35. Well, I know 10 goes into 35 3 times. 10 times 3 is 30, you get 5 left over. So your answer is 3 and 5 over 10. Now, you could simplify this. You could say, hey, I could take a 5 out of 5 and a 5 out of 10 and change it to 3 and 1/2. So 3 and 1/2 would be my actual simplified answer. Now, if you got 3 and 5 over 10, that's okay. But it is good to start looking at fractions and seeing how you can simplify them. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. Please write down any questions that you might have, and thanks for watching.